The moment I walked into that conference room, my son-in-law looked up from his chair, caught my eye, and smiled. Not a warm smile. The kind of smile a cat gives a mouse it's already decided is too slow to run. He thought he had won. He hadn't. I want to tell you how we got there, because the ending only means something if you understand what came before it. My name is Sylvia. I'm 63 years old. I live in a 2-bedroom house in Chattanooga, Tennessee, with a vegetable garden that gets too much sun in July and a back porch I've been meaning to repaint since 2019. I am the kind of woman people look at and see a grandmother. Gray hair I stopped fighting 5 years ago. Readers on a chain around my neck. Comfortable shoes because life is too short for uncomfortable shoes. What people don't see, what I never particularly advertised, is that I spent 27 years as a forensic accountant for the federal government. I retired at 60 from the Financial Crimes Unit of the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. My specialty was tracing hidden assets. Money people thought they had made disappear. Not really, always leaves a shadow. My daughter's leaves a shadow. My daughter's name is Paige. She is 34, kind in the way that sometimes gets mistaken for weakness, and the best mother I have ever seen to my 2 grandchildren. Her son is 7. Her daughter just turned 5. They are the reason I agreed to move closer after my husband passed. I sold the house in Columbus, packed what mattered, and drove south. I did not move down here to interfere. I want to be very clear about that. I moved here to be useful and to stay out of the way. The interfering started when I paid attention. Paige met her husband, Brandon, at a work conference in Nashville 4 years ago. He was charming. He is still charming. That's the thing about men like Brandon. The charm doesn't go anywhere. It just starts serving a different function. When they were dating, it made her feel special. By the time I moved here, I noticed it turned on and off like a faucet depending on who was in the room. With me, he was always warm, always solicitous. Sylvia, can I get you anything? Sylvia, you look tired. Are you sleeping okay? Sylvia, I was reading that women your age really need to watch their vitamin D levels. Women your age. The first time he said it, I let it go. The second time I filed it. I should explain what I mean by that. 27 years of forensic work teaches you something that has nothing to do with spreadsheets. It teaches you to notice what people want you to overlook. When someone draws your attention to one thing, you look at the other thing. When someone is very helpful, you ask what they're being helpful toward. Brandon was being helpful toward a particular conclusion, that I was getting older, that my memory was perhaps not what it was, that perhaps big decisions, financial decisions, family decisions, should be handled by people whose sins were sharper, younger, more present. My mind is extremely present. I just didn't tell him that. Paige and Brandon had a joint financial advisor. His name was Garrett. I read it on the folder Brandon left on the kitchen counter the one afternoon I came over to watch the grandchildren, and he didn't realize I was early. I didn't open the folder. I just read the name on the tab. Garrett Osman, CPA, Wealth Management. I Googled Garrett Osman when I got home. He was licensed. His firm was real. But he had 2 complaints filed with the state board in the past 6 years. Both settled quietly. Both involving elderly clients whose accounts had been restructured without adequate documentation. Quietly settled complaints are louder than people think. I didn't say anything to Paige, not yet. I needed more than a Google search and a gut feeling. I've testified in federal court enough times to know the difference between suspicion and evidence. What I did do was start accepting more invitations to family dinners. It was at one of those dinners, a Sunday in October. The kids had gone to bed, and Brandon had opened a second bottle of wine, that I heard the thing I wasn't supposed to hear. He didn't know I'd come back downstairs. I'd left my reading glasses on the kitchen counter, and I came back for them quietly because I have always moved quietly. 30 years of habit. He was on the phone in the living room. She doesn't need to be on the account anymore, Garrett. I've been working on it. She's not as sharp as she used to be. Her daughter agrees. I stood in the doorway to the kitchen. My reading glasses were on the counter 2 feet behind me. Just shift it into the structure we talked about. The way we did the Hendersons. Yeah, before end of year. He laughed at something Garrett said. Her mother? Please. She's 63. She still thinks a spreadsheet is something you put on a bed. I picked up my glasses. I went back upstairs. I sat on the edge of the guest bed in the dark for a long time. Here is what I felt. If you want to know the truth, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Something I used to feel when I was handed a case that looked complex and airtight, but had one thread that wasn't quite right. I felt the particular clarity that comes when you stop being confused and start being certain. My son-in-law was stealing from my daughter, not dramatically, not all at once. The way people like that always do it. Slowly, carefully, in amounts and through structures that would take someone who knew what to look for to ever find. The Henderson family, whoever they were, had probably never found it. They might never know. But I knew what to look for. I want to tell you I confronted him immediately. I want to tell you I called Paige that same night. But that's not how this works, and I learned that lesson early in my career. The first instinct, to warn, to protect, to stop, is the instinct that gets cases thrown out. You move before you have the full picture, and suddenly you're the unreliable one. Suddenly the question becomes about you. I called my former colleague instead. Her name is Denise, and she was my supervisor for 11 years before she retired to Scottsdale. She picked up on the third ring at 10:30 on a Sunday night the way she always did, as if she'd been expecting the call. I told her what I'd heard. I told her what I'd found on the state board website. She was quiet for a moment. "You're not working this case, Sylvia," she said. "You're the family. You need to be the family. I know. What do you need? I need to know if there's a way to pull the SEC filings on Garrett Osmond's firm without it tracing back to anyone connected to Paige and Brandon." Another pause. "Give me 3 days." I gave her 3 days. What Denise found, and she found it through channels that were entirely above board, I want to be clear, was a pattern. Garrett Osmond's firm had a subsidiary structure that on the surface looked like a standard tax-advantaged investment vehicle. Underneath, it was a mechanism for quietly absorbing assets from joint accounts into individually controlled trusts. The clients whose names appeared on the original accounts gradually found themselves as secondary signatories rather than primary ones. By the time most of them realized what had happened, the restructuring was complete, and the legal language was airtight. The technical term for it is constructive fraud. The practical term is theft. Brandon's name appeared in a side letter connected to 2 of the impacted accounts as a referral source. He had been paid on both occasions a finder's fee. Not from the clients, from Garrett, for bringing them in. This is the part where I have to tell you about Paige, because she is not a footnote in this story. She is the center of it. My daughter is not naive. She is trusting, which is different. She trusted Brandon because he had given her reason to, or at least had managed her reasons carefully. She believed he was a devoted father. She believed he was building toward a future for their family. She believed that when he suggested she let him take over the financial management. "You have enough on your plate, babe, between the kids and your job." He was being helpful. Women like my daughter get called naive after the fact. I have always hated that. The failure isn't in the trusting. The failure is in the person who saw the trust and decided to use it. I needed to tell her. But I needed to tell her correctly, with documentation, with a third party, with something she could hold in her hands that wasn't just her mother's word against her husband's. Because he would deny it. He would make it about me. He would bring up my age, my retirement, the fact that I had been struggling since losing Harold, my husband's name, weaponized, and suddenly the story would shift from what he had done to whether I was competent to know what I was seeing. I had seen that play before. I had seen it in depositions. I had seen it in courtrooms. I was not going to let it happen to me in my own family. So I prepared. For 6 weeks, I prepared. Denise connected me with a private attorney she trusted in Nashville, a woman named, well, it doesn't matter what her name was. What matters is that she specialized in civil asset fraud and she knew exactly what we had. "This is solid," she told me on a Thursday afternoon in her office in Green Hills. "This is genuinely solid." "I know," I said. "Are you ready to move on it?" I thought about Paige. I thought about my grandchildren. I thought about Brandon sitting in that living room, laughing into his phone. "Schedule it," I said. Here is what Brandon did not know. He did not know that the meeting he had called, at Garrett Osman's office, framed as a year-end financial review, with me specifically invited so that he could, in front of a witness, begin the documented process of repositioning my daughter as a secondary authority on their joint accounts, was not going to go the way he planned. He did not know that I had already provided copies of all relevant documentation to my daughter's attorney, who had filed a preliminary injunction the previous afternoon, freezing all accounts connected to the Osman firm pending investigation. He did not know that the SEC's Financial Crimes Division had received an anonymous tip from a former federal employee with 27 years of documentation experience, submitted through proper channels 3 weeks prior. He did not know any of that when he looked up at me in that conference room doorway and smiled his cat smile. Garrett Osman was already there, seated at the head of the table, laptop open. He didn't know either. He looked the way financial criminals always look right before everything changes, relaxed, comfortable, in control of the room. I sat down. Brandon said, "Sylvia, thanks for coming. We just wanted to make sure everyone was on the same page about the accounts going forward." I said, "Of course." Garrett cleared his throat. "So, Paige, there are a few structures we've been discussing that we think will be beneficial for long term." There was a knock at the door. It opened before anyone answered it. Paige's attorney came in first. Behind her were two men I recognized the posture of before I recognized anything else. Federal posture. The particular way people carry themselves when they have authority and don't need to announce it. Brandon's face did the thing I had been waiting to see. That smile, that easy, practiced management smile, dissolved, not slowly, all at once, like something cut from underneath. He looked at me. I looked back at him. "What is this?" he said. His attorney answered, "Not mine. Mr. Kehoe, that's Brandon's last name, Brandon Kehoe. I'd advise you not to say anything further." Brandon looked at me again. His voice, when it came, was very quiet. "You did this." I said, "I noticed something wasn't right. Then I did my job. You're retired." "I am," I said. "I'm also still licensed." Garrett had gone a color I've only seen a few times in my career. Not pale, exactly. More like the color drains out and something else comes in, something that looks a lot like the understanding of consequence. He looked at his laptop. Then he closed it. Nobody said anything for a long moment. I picked up my purse from the floor beside my chair, not because I was leaving. We weren't done, not by a long stretch, but because I needed something to do with my hands that wasn't fold them in my lap like a woman waiting to be spoken to. "I've been sitting in rooms like this one for 30 years, I said. "I know what the documents look like. I know what the structure looks like. I know what a side letter referral fee looks like, and I know what it means when a client's name moves from the primary line to the secondary line in the same fiscal quarter. Their spouse begins positioning them as mentally diminished." Brandon opened his mouth. "Don't," his attorney said. I continued, "Paige is not mentally diminished. And neither am I. I won't give you every detail of what came after, because some of it is still working through the legal system, and some of it belongs to my daughter more than it belongs to me. What I can tell you is this. The accounts were frozen. The investigation is ongoing. Garrett Osman's firm has been suspended pending a full audit. Brandon moved out of the house in November. The divorce proceedings are in process, and Paige has an excellent attorney who does not need my help, though I am available if she needs it. The grandchildren are okay. They are confused, the way children are when the shape of their home changes, but they are okay. My grandson asked me last week if Grandpa Brandon was coming back, and I told him I didn't know, which is true, and that whatever happened, nothing about how much his parents love him was going to change, which is also true. I drive over on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I make dinner. I do the dishes. Sometimes I sit on the back porch with Paige after the kids are in bed, and we don't talk about any of it. We just sit. She said to me, about 3 weeks after that conference room, "Mom, why didn't you tell me sooner?" It's a fair question. I've thought about it. "Because I needed you to be able to believe me," I said. "If I'd come to you with a feeling, he would have made it about me. He would have said I was struggling, that I was confused, that I was jealous of your life or still grieving your father, or just becoming one of those women who..." I stopped. I needed to hand you something real, something you could hold. She was quiet for a while. I should have seen it, she said. No, I said. That's not how it works. You saw what he showed you. That's not a failure. That's just what happened. She leaned her head on my shoulder the way she used to do when she was small, when the world was something I could explain to her and make sense. I can't always do that anymore. But some nights, on the back porch in Chattanooga with the fireflies coming up from the grass, I can still try. People ask me sometimes, after they find out what I used to do, which more people know now than did before, whether I miss the work. I tell them the truth, which is, not the way they mean. I don't miss the office. I don't miss the depositions or the interagency meetings or the particular bureaucratic misery of federal procurement paperwork. I don't miss the cases that went nowhere, or the ones that cost more than they recovered, or the ones where the person on the other end of the scheme was someone's grandfather, and you had to be the one to explain to their family what he had done. What I miss is the clarity, that feeling I told you about earlier, the moment when the confusion resolves and you know exactly where to look. I felt it, standing in my daughter's kitchen with my reading glasses in my hand at 10:30 on a Sunday night. I felt it in that conference room when Brandon's smile disappeared. There is something, I will admit, about being 63 years old with gray hair and comfortable shoes and walking into a room where someone has decided what you are and then showing them, quietly, who you actually are. Not for drama, not for the satisfaction of the look on his face, though I won't pretend that wasn't something. For Paige, for my grandchildren, for every person who sat across from Garrett Osman and trusted him because he wore a nice suit and used confident language and the documents looked official. They thought I was the grandmother sitting in the corner. They forgot, or never knew, that before I was the grandmother, I was the one who found the money people thought they had hidden. Money doesn't hide. It just waits for someone who knows how to look. I know how to look. I always have.